At 6 o'clock, the phone rang, and my parents had the scout executive, Preston Pond, on the phone. And he said he wanted to know if I'd go with Mr. Everton over here to operate the boat concession. And my folks said yes, and so Lou Everton, he had a mattress factory in Logan. He picked me up and we came over here to Fish Haven. That was the big resort on the lake. There was nothing here in Garden City. Just a lot of moss all along the shore. And there was the resort and dance hall at Fish Haven. And it was the big place. They'd come all the way from Evanston up in Idaho Falls and down in Ogden. They'd come here to the dance Saturday night. But Lou and Everton, his brother Vaughn, had leased the boat concession from the Stock brothers that built the resort and whose homes were there at Fish Haven. And so I came over here and I spent the rest of the summer over in 37. I was in high school, then at Logan High School. And I operated the boat's concession in the summer of 37, 38, 39. And then the Fish and Wildlife Service came here to make a biological survey of the lake. And I had 3 years in the forestry school in wildlife down in Logan. And so I took a job with the Fish and Wildlife Service. We made a biological survey of the lake. We made a 5-foot contour map of the bottom, and we had gill nets to get samples of the lake. And I did that in 39, or in 40, in 41, and then I went on a mission in 41. I was in the Colorado Springs before the war broke out. But they let me finish the mission, and I spent the rest of my mission up in Nebraska. But then I decided to be a dentist, and I got an acceptance at the University of Michigan Dental School, and after I'd been there a couple of years, the war was on, and so we didn't have a vacation the first year, but the second year I had a vacation. And so I contacted the Boy Scouts in Logan if I could work here at Camp Hunt. It's just up the road here a few miles. I had a Red Cross life-saving certificate as a water safety instructor, probably the first one in Cache Valley. And they gave me a job at the scout camp. And at the end of the summer, I decided that I would swim across the lake, because they said no one had ever done it. None of the old-timers here had ever heard about anyone swimming across the lake. And I was at, so then my friend Reed Budge and his wife Gwyneth, and Reed's sister Marie and her husband said that they would follow me across the lake if I would swim. And so on Monday morning, I went up to Cottle's grocery store on the highway, and I bought a white cap, because I didn't want my neck to get sunburned, so I wore that white cap backwards. And I bought a bottle of Vaseline and put half of it on me. And I started swimming at 11 o'clock at Fish Haven. Now the lake at Fish Haven is just as wide there as it is here or at the state line. It's about the same all along here until you get down here to Sweetwater and Ideal Beach, and then it's a lot closer. So when you swim here, you're swimming as far as anybody can swim across the lake. I suppose you go over to Cisco Beach. Where do you end?
Yeah.
Where do you end over there?
Cisco.
Cisco. That's where we go in January to catch Cisco. But the lake had been churned up for all during August, and so it was quite cold. But it was choppy for the first hour or so, and then the lake got calm, and so it was real calm for me to swim. And I swam straight over to Lawrence Peterson's home. It's 3 miles south of the state line, or north of the state line. But he had stuck willows in the sand to make a grove of trees where people would come. He thought they might come and camp. Of course, they never did. But he had just died, so old Pete wasn't there for me when I got over there. But that was my target, and that's why I wanted to swim the breaststroke, so I wouldn't swim anywhere but straight in a straight line. And I thought I might hang on to the boat and eat something, but I was cold and I didn't want to take any time, so I swam continuously. I didn't pause once in the 8 miles. Actually, it isn't quite 8. I think maybe 7.5, something like that. But when I got over there, Reed Budge and his wife Gwyneth followed me all the way. They had a 16-foot Thompson outboard with a trolling motor, plus a couple of buckets. In addition to the trolling motor.
Right?
Yeah, but the exhaust would spread across that water, and I didn't want to breathe it, so I'd keep them back a couple hundred yards behind me. But then Reed and Reed's sister Marie Budge, she just died this year, and her husband Dick Chambers, he had been a mayor down in Logan. They had a cabin here, and they followed me for about a mile out, and then they had to go in and operate the cafe at Fish Haven Resort. But Reed and Gwyneth followed me all the way over, but Richard and Marie came over and joined me the last hour or so. And I remember when I stood up on the shore there, I says, well, I'll never try that again. And I haven't. Once is enough. I sure admire you folks for what you do. Now it took, with my breaststroke and a little bit of side stroke, it took me from 11 in the morning till 5 to get over there. And that's pretty slow for you folks. What do you do it in about 2 hours?
Oh yeah.
How long does it take you now?
The fastest last year were about 2.5.
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And you're swimming the crawl?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you swim a straight line?
They all have.
You don't.
Yeah. Try to.
Exactly.
They all have a boat with them, a kayak, and
Yeah.
we give them a landmark to look for.
Well, 50 years to the day later, my son, the older brother here to these, was down in Las Vegas, and he wanted to swim on my 50th anniversary. So he was swimming in Las Vegas every day, and then
In a gym, in a warm pool. He'd go in the morning and swim all day till he'd figure he'd done 8 miles, and then people there thought he was crazy because he'd just do laps all day long.
yeah. But
Should have gone out to Lake
we put in right at the state line. There's a little public place there about 100 feet wide at the state line. And we put in there and followed the state line. I was in an inboard following him with my family.
He was at the wheel.
And when he got about a mile or two offshore, a wind came up and the whitecaps came down from the north, and he had to swim in those whitecaps the last hour or so. So instead of ending up on the state line, he ended down here, almost where you guys are going to land, down here by Cisco. But he made it. Any questions? I sure admire you folks.
How did you train for it? Or did you just one day say, I'm doing this?
What?
Did you train? Were you a swimmer?
Well, when I was, I was a swimmer all my life. But while I was with the Scouts, I had a free period between the afternoon boat and canoe when the Scouts were there before dinner. And so then I would swim around the resort there over at Swan Creek. And Swan Creek is just several hundred yards beyond the Scout camp. And I was swimming all summer, yeah. So I figured I could do it. It wasn't anything that I was gambling with.
So how many finished with you in the boat? How many were in the boat to say, he did it?
4. Well, there were 2 boats when I got over there, with 2 in each boat. And all 4 of those have died now. Marie died just a month or 2 ago. Her husband died just a year or 2 ago. And it's interesting that when my boy left the state line, here come Marie and Dick, the same ones that had been with 50 years earlier.
Yeah,
they stopped in.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And years later, there was a gentleman here that I think was confused. Some of the histories has his name, and he had the same day and the same people following him. And Dick Chambers, who was the mayor of Logan, caught wind of that, so he went to the county seat. He was an attorney. Did a sworn affidavit with photos and everything, and put it in the history in Bear Lake County, saying no, it was Lynn Crookston, and we were there, and then to try to set the story straight. So, and it was in the Logan Herald.
Well, the
and
first,
Paris
yeah,
I read
Post,
the-
and
it was first published
Article you sent.
the morning after I swam. The fellow that owned the resort at that time, Reed Budge, he phoned the Paris Post. There was a little paper in Paris, and it's reported in the Paris Post. That was the next day after I did it. And then the Tribune picked it up, and Desert News, and the Logan Herald Journal picked up the story. And they all said I was the first.
So that other gentleman, when did he do it?
but he didn't do it.
He didn't do it. He was in like a rest home.
He was in
or
a rest
something,
home,
and he was claiming the story as his.
Oh, okay.
But there's a couple of little books from Bear Lake that have him in there, and I guess Dick Chambers was frustrated with that, so he went and did an affidavit and everything. And
Well, there was a fellow that swam from over here by Lake Town to the point here by Garden City, and they claimed to have been, they swam the lake, but he just swam about 4 miles away.
What'd you eat after what was your first
Oh,
meal?
I had a steak. They owned the cafe, so Dick and Marie fixed a big steak for me.
Did you see the Bear Lake Monster?
I sure did, yeah. Hey, that's another story.
he wrote it, really.
Are you interested in the Bear Lake Monster?
If they are.
Yes.
Well, I had a friend in Logan High School by the name of Lynn Jenkins, and he was staying with me over here for a week. And a fellow that had a tire shop in Logan came over to Fish Haven and said, "Hey, there's an elk swimming across the lake," and I said, "Well, let's go down and take a look." So the 3 of us got in our 16-foot outboard, and we came down here, and out here about a mile here was a moose swimming across the lake instead of an elk. He thought, but it was in velvet. It was in the summer, and I had a box camera, so I got 5 pictures of it. And then Lynn had been reading the Outdoor Life magazines, and he knew about the Bull Moose Club. back in Michigan, Wisconsin. And so he was going to be a Bow Moose Club member. So he took all his clothes off and stood up on the bow of my 16-foot outboard. And you know enough about outboards, you can't get the bow close to anything when you're spinning. And that moose been going around in circles, and we were trying to get our bow close to it so he could jump on it.
You wanted to ride it.
Yeah.
He wanted to ride it.
You see, that to belong to the club, you got to ride a moose, and then you get off of it before it can bottom it, or it'll kill you. And he was going to ride it, and then after a half hour, we thought, boy, this is a game animal. What if it drowns out here, you know? But it was headed from here over to the hot springs, which is about, what, 12 miles or more, I guess, in that direction. And so finally we pulled away, and instead of continuing its swim, it went up in the mountains here at Lakota, where the resort was. And that winter, George Kelker, who was the professor of wildlife management at Logan, had a doctor's degree from Michigan, and he had written a paper on the moose. And he was snowshoeing west of here up at White Pine Lake and saw these tracks in the snow, deep snow. And so then he didn't have time to follow them, but he told his forestry students that they'd go with him the next week, he'd show them a moose. But they didn't have any moose here, just the one I photographed. And so they went to Tony Grove Lake, they got on the tracks, and they followed it down to the highway and took pictures of it. And its antlers in the winter were the same as my antlers in the summer, so it was the same moose. And the interesting thing is that the legislature looked at their books and found out it wasn't even a game animal. And so the first thing they did in January was to make the moose a game animal in Utah. Protect it. And that's why now we have so many moose, is because the farmers aren't shooting them. It's illegal. Before that, I don't know why they didn't have any moose, maybe because the farmers were harvesting them and it wasn't a game animal, and maybe they didn't have any moose then. I don't know, but we sure have them now.
To a moose.
Right.
So his photograph was used by Utah State for many years in their publications and stuff.
Oh,
It was
cool.
really, it's probably the first moose ever photographed in Utah.
Yeah, Dr. D.R. Rasmussen and George Kelker, who were the wildlife professors at Logan, said that my photograph was the first photograph of a moose filmed in the state of Utah. It was pretty close to Idaho, you'll have to admit that, but it was still in Utah. But not only the college used my picture, but then the Cache County, all their advertisements came out with a picture of a moose swimming across Bear Lake. Cache County likes to have tours from Bear Lake, you see.